Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to the Asia Institute and indeed to the University of Melbourne for what I think will be a fascinating lecture from our visitor Solahudin about the danger of ISIS deportees and returnees in Indonesia. And we're very pleased to have Solahudin out here as our first Indonesia Initiative Visitor of the Year. This is a scheme that allows us to bring 3 outstanding Indonesian scholars to the university each year. And indeed, as part of our overall visitor program, we're also very pleased to have tonight Dr. Soraya Afif from the University of Indonesia join us in the audience, who will be an Asia scholar here at the university for the next few years, and keep an eye out for a public lecture from Soraya as well during her time here. So it really is tremendous at the university to have the resources to bring out such a variety of scholars. Now, I won't go through Solahudin's biography in detail. It's been circulated in the event announcement. Suffice it to say, I think he's really one of the foremost scholars of jihadism in Indonesia over a very long period, dating really right back to helping and in fact leading efforts in the first place to uncover the extent of jihadi and terror movements that emerged after the end of authoritarian rule in Indonesia. And I think all of our understanding of those networks in Indonesia through their various transformations has really been led and enriched by solid scholarship over the past 2 decades. Tonight we'll be turning his attention, as I said, to a new influence on jihadism across Southeast Asia, the emergence of ISIS and the conflict in Syria and Iraq, something that has really re-energized jihadi movements at a time when I guess the overall perspective was that their capacity and energy was diminishing. Now, of course, we come to the time of ISIS's defeats in the Middle East and Syria, as well as Syria, of course, being in the Middle East, in the Middle East and the Philippines, and start to think about the implications of those defeats for jihadism in the region, and that's what Solahudin will take us through tonight. Before I do hand over to him, just a quick housekeeping note. We have had a lot of interest in tonight's lecture from outside the university, and so we will be recording the audio from tonight's session to post on the Indonesia at Melbourne blog. So I would just ask everyone to keep that in mind during tonight's session. Without further ado, over to you, and could everyone please welcome Solahudin. Thank you.
Thank you dear for having me, and good night. So tonight we will discuss about the Indonesian returnees and also Indonesian deportees. I will explain what is the returnees and what is the deportees also. But Indonesian government actually in many occasions concerns about the Indonesian returnees and also Indonesian deportees. They are really worried that these returnees and also deportees, when they come back to Indonesia, they will conduct attack in Indonesia. One of the reasons for concern actually because Indonesia have experience in the past actually. Indonesia has prior experience with returnees actually from overseas conflict area becoming involved with terrorist act in Indonesia. For example, there were 42 Afghan veterans were involved in terrorism offenses after they come back to Indonesia, and also more than 50 Mindanao veterans who trained in Mindanao also become terrorists after they come back to Indonesia. But before I discuss actually about this situation, I want to make clarification about the terminology for returnees, deportees, and also FTF, foreign terrorist fighters. Because in Indonesia, sometimes the government actually mix together between FTF, returnees, and deportees. When I mention about the FTF, foreign terrorist fighters is the Indonesian who travel to Syria and also live in Syria, involved with the combat there, involved with the war in Syria or Iraq. But if I mention about the returnees, actually the Indonesian who already come back from conflict area such as Syria, Iraq, or Mindanao. But different definition for deportees. If I talk about the deportees, actually people who willing to travel to conflict area such as Syria, Iraq, or Mindanao, but they being arrested in transit countries such as Turkey, and after that being deported to Indonesia. So there are three terminology: the FTF, foreign terrorist fighters, the Indonesian who are in Syria, Iraq, or Mindanao. There is actually also returnees, the Indonesian who already come back to Indonesia from conflict area, and also the deportees who being arrested in transit countries. Oh, yeah. According to Indonesian National Police, now there are around 600 Indonesian FTF in Syria and Iraq. And also, according to police data, there are more than 80 returnees and more than 500 deportees in Indonesia. So number of the deportees actually is huge. From 2014 until 2017, there were around 30,000 FTF in Iraq and Syria from around 100 countries, including more than 600 Indonesian FTF. The question is, why many people actually living for Syria? As we know, the Syria is one of the bloodiest conflict in the world now. More than 500,000 people being killed in Syria because of the civil war. More than 4 million people actually leaving that country and become refugees in other countries. The question is, why people living for Syria come to Syria, including some Indonesians? Why they decided actually to living for Syria? I conduct actually interview with 92 deportees. I want to know why they are living for Syria. I conclude actually there are three clusters of motivation why the Indonesian actually living for Syria. The first one of their motivation. So the first motivation actually is related with eschatology narrative, related with the prophecy. Why Indonesians are living for Syria? Because they consider the Syria is the land of Malachim. What is the Malachim? Malachim is Armageddon. So a lot of the Indonesians who travel to Syria really believe that right now we are in the end of the world. According to many prophecy, Syria is the place for Al-Malachim, the place for Armageddon, and the Messiah will come to Syria very soon. Also, in Syria there is final battle between Messiah versus Antichrist. So, I interviewed some of the deportees. I asked them why you are living for Syria. The answer is very simple. They said, I want to meet with the Messiah. So simple. One of the reasons why Indonesian people living for Syria, because of this prophecy. And this is not something new for Indonesia. I give some example. In 2005, do you know Abu Bakar Bashir, former leader of Jemaah Islamiyah? In 2005, asked his follower, to set up the committee to welcoming Messiah in 2005. Why at the time Abu Bakar Bashir asked his follower to set up this committee? Because at the time Abu Bakar Bashir really believed that the Messiah will come to Indonesia. Why? Because according to one prophecy mentioned, the Messiah will come to the earth after two natural phenomena. The first one is lunar eclipse. The second one is solar eclipse. If both phenomena actually being taken place during the holy month of Ramadan, after that, the Messiah will coming to Indonesia. But the problem is the Messiah didn't come to Indonesia. So the obsession about the end of the world is already exists since early 2000 among the extremists. When the conflict in Syria began, people start again to thinking about the end of the world. Because before conflict of Syria, we have Arab Spring. It's very interesting how the extremists actually interpret the political situation in Middle East. After the Arab Spring, there is ISIS. And after that, ISIS set up the Caliphate. Yeah, they declare Islamic State and later they declare the Caliphate. How the extremists in Indonesia interpret this situation? They said, according to the prophecy, in the end of the world, the Caliphate in the end of the world will be established. They call it in Arabic, Khilafah ala minhajul nubuwah. According to the prophecy, this Caliphate will be led by Prophet Muhammad descendant. And we know that Abu Bakar al-Baghdadi also claimed himself as descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. So some extremists start to thinking, this is the Caliphate in the end of the world. This is the Khalifah al-Minhajul Nubuwah. So ISIS represent as the Caliphate in the end of the world for some of extremists in Indonesia. So that is why many Indonesians actually travel to Syria to join with ISIS. So this is actually one of the motivation why people living for Syria. So yeah, it's about the second motivation why Indonesian actually living for Syria, because the motivation actually live under Syariah law. For many extremists in Indonesia, it is obligatory for all Muslims to live under Syariah law. In their view, before ISIS declared its caliphate, there were no Muslim country in the world who really implemented the true Syariah law, including Saudi Arabia. Even if we read actually a lot of the text written by ISIS propaganda, they mention that the Saudi government is infidel government. For us, Saudi is too Islamic, but for ISIS, less Islamic, the Saudi Arabia. So, before ISIS declared the Caliphate, at the time, Muslims were still permitted to live under non-Sharia law because it is an emergency situation. But now the situation has changed. ISIS has already declared the Caliphate, and this new Islamic State really have commitment to implement the Sharia. So that is why compulsory for every Muslim to move to Syria. ISIS also distributes some propaganda videos and also photos that show life under Islamic State is as normal as in any other city in Middle East. ISIS propaganda even claim life under Islamic State is better life than life in their own countries. Because people who come to Syria will get a lot of the facilities. For example, they will get job, they will get free education for their kids, they will get free apartment, free housing, and also free for healthcare. For many Indonesians, this is quite attractive. Almost all of the program of Jokowi actually already implemented by ISIS. Some of them may be considered about that. Anything for free in Iraq and Syria. So some Indonesian actually extremists join ISIS because of this motivation also. So another motivation actually, the third motivation, is actually to help Muslims under attack by Shia regime. Because for many extremists, actually what's happened in Syria is war between the Shia regime against the Sunni community, the Sunni opposition group. So many of Indonesians living for Syria because they want to wage jihad against regime of Bashar Assad. Particularly, actually, people who are living for Syria from 2013 until 2014, before ISIS declared the Caliphate. But after ISIS declared the Caliphate, many of the Indonesians who are living for Syria with the motivation for living under Sharia law or the prophecy. So this is actually the motivation for Indonesian living for Syria and Iraq. Many people actually say that the situation is similar with Afghanistan cases. You know, in around 200 Indonesians actually went to Afghanistan from 1985 until 1993. But the situation actually, in my opinion, is different. Why the situation is different? Because at the time, the Indonesian extremists living for Afghanistan actually to conduct military training in Afghanistan. They don't have any intention to fight against Uni Soviet army at the time. No. Even the leader of the extremists actually prohibit the Indonesians who were in Afghanistan at the time to involve with combat. Because their goal actually is train the Indonesian extremists with the military skill. After they got military skill, they will come back to Indonesia to fight against Suharto regime. So it's very clear. No, different motivation for Indonesians who are living for Afghanistan at that time. So that is why they are living for Afghanistan, not with his family. Different with the Indonesian FTA or deportees of returnees. Many of them actually bring their family to Syria because they want to live in Syria. At the time, the Indonesian extremists don't have any intention to live in Afghanistan. But the Indonesians who are living for Syria, they want to live in Syria. That is why we call it actually one-way ticket jihad. Because they don't want to come back to Indonesia. Even there is actually propaganda, video propaganda, how they burn actually Indonesian passport, something like that, you know. Because they don't have any intention to come back to Indonesia at that time. But now it's different. So mostly people going to Syria don't have any intention to come back. They sell all of their property before leaving for Syria and travel with their family. Also actually, almost there is no push factor people leaving for Syria, for Indonesia. Because in Indonesia, there is no persecution, no intimidation, no discrimination against Muslims. So that is why there is only pull factor for the Syrian cases. Different with Afghanistan cases. The push factor is very clear. Because of the repressive of the Suharto regime at the time. That is the push factor. But for Syrian cases for Indonesia, it's difficult to decide which one the push factor. So different. For example, also different with Malaysian cases. If we look the data around ISIS supporter, 40 ISIS supporter in Malaysia, is totally different with the Indonesia. The majority of them come from lower middle class in Malaysia. They don't have any permanent job. This is Malaysian cases. And mainly either former or past supporters, opposition group. In Indonesia, if we talk about the socio-economic background, for example, from data of the deportees, 68% come from middle class. And more than 80% come from upper middle class. The rest is come from lower middle class. So if we look actually the socio-economic background of Indonesian deportees or Indonesian returnees is different with the Malaysia. From Malaysian cases we can see what is the pull factor, a push factor. But for Indonesian, it's more difficult to define what is push factor for Indonesian living for Syria. Also, if we talk about the education background, most of them actually finish senior high school, but the majority also finish bachelor degree, including many of them also finish master degree. Even one of the deportees actually alumni from one of the university in Australia. So this is actually the number of returnees. Number of returnees identified by name from 2013 to August 2017. So this is the returnees, people who already who come back to Indonesia. Yeah. So if we look actually the number of returnees and look this chart, we can divide it, the returnees, if we talk about the affiliation.
we can divide it. Actually, the returnees belong to three groups. The first one, majority, Indonesian returnees, actually affiliate with ISIS. There are 44 people affiliated with Islamic State. But there are also 12 Indonesian returnees who affiliate with non-ISIS group. So when they were in Syria, they joined with the opposition group, but not with ISIS. For example, joined with Ahrar-Sham, joined with Jabhat Nusra, etc. But non-ISIS. And also there is actually 8 people, Indonesian returning, belong to the Salafist group. So this is actually very important if we want to assess the danger of the returnees. If we look more detail about the affiliation. The importance of affiliation. From those affiliations, we can detect who are potentially dangerous. People who affiliate with ISIS potentially more dangerous than people who affiliate with other group. Why? Because it's very clear. ISIS appeal all of its supporters to conduct attack around the world. So, how about non-ISIS jihadists? They consider jihad in Indonesia to be illegitimate, especially after Al-Qaeda revised view of jihad was translated and published in Indonesia. So in 2011, actually, there is actually a book written by Osama bin Laden. The title is Letter from Abu Taba. This book is very interesting because this book actually makes evaluation all of the terrorist act being conducted by Al-Qaeda. And after that, there is actually another book written by Abu Yahya Alibi. Same conclusion. Most of the victims of the terror attack being conducted by Al-Qaeda is Muslim. Because of that, they conclude prohibit to conduct attack in Muslim countries. One of the evaluation is very interesting from Athaillah Alibi. Even he mentioned that the 2002 Bali bombing violated Islamic law. So since 2011, many non-ISIS jihadists who affiliate with Al-Qaeda consider that conduct attack in Muslim countries is prohibited, being bad. But it's very interesting that book. But if you want to conduct attack, go ahead. Conduct attack in individual countries such as Korea, Japan, etc. They mentioned, but not in Muslim countries. So, for the returnees who affiliate with non-ISIS jihadist group, they consider that jihad in Indonesia to be illegitimate. Meanwhile, Salafi group never consider violence in Indonesia legitimate. So if we look the affiliation, the group who potentially dangerous is people who affiliate with ISIS. But it's not enough just to look the affiliation. We need more to assess the dangers of returnees and the deportees. This is a number of arrested returnees. Number of arrested returnees as of December 2011. Jihadis non-ISIS is 4 people, ISIS 14 people. This figure is important when we want to conduct assess about the potential danger of the returnees and the returnees. So majority is still ISIS. So let me check actually more detail. Correlation between legal cases and motivation for returning. There are 5 ISIS returning being arrested because they involve planned terror attack in Indonesia. Their motivation for return to undertake act of terror. There is one ISIS returnee being arrested because he had facilitated the hijrah of ISIS supporters to Syria. His motivation for returning because he ordered by ISIS to return to facilitated more departure to Syria. But majority of returnees, including non-ISIS returnees, being arrested for undergoing military training in Syria or having been involved in combat in Syria. Most of them are returned disillusioned because the living standard didn't meet expectation or because of conflict among the opposition in Syria. Including majority ISIS returnees decided to come back to Indonesia because they were disillusioned. So, the number of returnees, I mentioned more than 80. My data is 66. Why the police only arrest 22 people? Why were not other returnees arrested? There are many reasons why some returnees have not been arrested. First one, police have limited legal tools available to arrest those who have gone to Syria. Terrorism as crime punishable under Indonesian law has to take place in Indonesia, not in other countries. So we talk about the locus delicti should be take place in Indonesia. According to our anti-terrorism law, the terrorist offenses should be taken place in Indonesia, not in other countries. For example, they conduct terrorist attack in Syria. When they come back, it's very difficult to prosecute them. That is one of the problem. Some of those who return this illusion were considered to be not dangerous and were therefore put into the radicalization program run by the National Anti-Terrorism Agency. So BNPT. They have program for returnees who consider not really dangerous. Most of them actually children and also women. Join with the radicalization program being run by BNPT. Another reason, the police simply don't know where some of the returnees are. This includes both ISIS and non-ISIS returnees. They have heard that they are back, but they don't know where. Also, police have allowed some returnees that they don't consider dangerous to return home freely, such as the Salafis. So the police don't consider the Salafis group is really dangerous. So that is why the police didn't arrest them. So this is one of the conclusions. Affiliation and motivation of returnees not arrested. Affiliation and motivation of returnees not arrested and the level of risk they pose. For non-ISIS jihadis, they have come back either because they are disappointed or because they have finished their task. In general, the non-ISIS jihadists consider jihad in Indonesia to be illegitimate because Indonesia is Muslim country. The Salafis generally return after they have finished their tasks such as delivery of humanitarian aid. They never consider violence in Indonesia legitimate. For the Salafis, most of them actually travel to Syria to conduct humanitarian aid. But the problem is, when they were there, they also involved in combating. So that is why we put them also as returnees. These Indonesian ISIS returnees are also seemingly not interested in conducting jihad operations in Indonesia. But it is critical to track down the other ISIS returnees, find where they are living, and investigate their motivation for return, as some may be committed to acts of violence. In addition to returnees, Indonesia also has problem with deportees, mostly those arrested in Turkey before they could cross over into ISIS-controlled territory. So from 2015 to the present, more than 500 Indonesians have been deported since 2015. Before 2015, it's very easy for Indonesian actually travel to Syria. Just buy ticket Jakarta Istanbul. From Istanbul they just go to border between Turkey and Syria and just cross that border and they are already in Syria territory. At that time before 2015 is very easy. Why? Because at that time this is actually related with the political policy of Turkish government. Before 2015, actually the Turkish government lose the border because at that time foreign policy of Turkey support the opposition and all of logistic and also human resources for opposition come from through Turkey. But because a lot of the FTF in Syria and a lot of the pressure, international pressure, particularly from foreign government who worry about the FTF situation, and also there is a lot of cases opposition conduct attack in the border of Turkey. Since 2015, the Turkish actually tightened their border. So since 2015, getting to Syria is getting difficult, including for Indonesian. So a lot of Indonesians being arrested in Turkey after 2014, in 2015. So now the number from 2015 until now, more than 500 deportees. Some 60% of deportees are women and children. And Indonesia has no law under which it can detain people just for having tried to go to Syria. According to Indonesian government, the deportees is like tourists. Yeah, cannot be arrested. We don't have any law instrument to arrest them. But there is actually some 26 deportees have been arrested for terrorist offenses now. Detained deportees, charge against them and motivation for leaving. This is important if we want to assess the dangers of the deportees. So, 26 people. Majority deportees who being arrested either because they involved with planned terror attack or financing people travel to Syria. Most of those were men who left to fight in Syria. By and large, they are the most dangerous of the deportees because they are ready to commit violence, if they fail to join the jihad in Syria or Mindanao, they could very easily undertake attack in Indonesia. This is accordance with ISIS fatwa. If the door to hijrah is closed, open the door to jihad at home. This is very important fatwa. For example, in 2016, actually the ISIS issued this fatwa in 2016. After this fatwa, in 2016, the Indonesian police arrested 170 suspected terrorists. In 2017, the Indonesian police arrested 175 suspected terrorists. This is the record. Interestingly, when I conduct interview with around 75 people, I ask why you involved. What is your motivation to involve with the terrorist offenses here in Indonesia? The answer, almost all of them, is similar. Because of this fatwa. They said, because the door for hijrah is closed, so we open the door to jihad in Indonesia. So more difficult to get into Syria, more active they conduct attack at home. So, what condition could provoke returnees and deportees to return to violence? Most of the returnees and deportees who come back to Indonesia are not interested in conducting terrorism at home. But it is important to remember that there are conditions that would provoke some individuals to return to violence. The condition is communal conflict. For example, like the case in Poso or in Ambon. If Muslims are seen as being under attack by non-Muslims, this could be a trigger, as it was in Poso and Ambon conflict. Trigger for the people, for the deportees and returnees to return to violence. For all of the training that took place on the Afghan border between 1985 and 1994, there was no violence by Afghan alumni in Indonesia until Ambon erupted in 1999 and local Muslim began dying. Training in Mindanao began long before Ambon and Poso conflict. But it was stepped up in response to those conflicts. So some of 50 Mindanao alumni become combatant because of that conflict. Terima kasih. Thank you.